Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. Hashtag Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. Let's get to it. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Aaron Pisano. Aaron, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. I feel like that we have to do New York, Westchester, Queens podcast as the weather starts to get nicer. Today it's not so great, but I feel like we've turned the corner here. I put the shovel away and the salt away. It's about time because it's April. So thank you really for being here and for taking the time out of your busy day.
Yeah.
This wasn't on my plan, but I want to jump in. Your motto or your doppelganger online, or whatever you want to call it, or one of your slogans is the advice your dad never gave you.
Yeah.
And obviously, everyone who's a parent wants to influence their children. And that obviously, I want to get into your children in a minute, but we have a great influence on our children. And I feel that the people who unfortunately don't grow up with parents or with those influential figures lose that influence. But what made you want to be the person who online, who's that person who says, I know that there's a void? Like, where does that come from? I know that there's a void in the educational process, specifically related to mortgages, finance, that part of personal finance, owning a home, owning a first home, all that kind of stuff. Where does that come from?
So I think, I grew up in Queens with a single mother. So, I mean, not to put down my grandfather or, a stepfather or two who was there for me and gave me advice and, not to demean any of their value, but I never had it. I never had that and I still don't. And there was always this piece of me that, sees my friends and my wife who can go to their dad and be like, hey, dad, I need help with this. I need this guidance. And it just, when you're talking to people through the mortgage process, it really is. It's one of those things where you see their dads with them all the time. And it's the one time where I'm like, maybe don't bring dad into this. Like, dad walking through a house with you is not going to, end the best. So, it's from that kind of a realm, just the personal experience, always wanting it, but never having it. And then, also kind of seeing the negative side of it, where I kind of grew that and it came from I'm a dad. That's like my number one job. Everything else is second. I work to live, not the other way around. And my kids are what I'm here for. So that's kind of the birth of it all. This last 6 to 8 months set me on a new trail.
And we're going to get to that. I promise you we're going to get to the kids because there's a cliffhanger here. Everyone should just, we're going to get there in a minute. But you said that sometimes you're walking through a house or whatever, and you think that dads give bad advice. You think that sometimes they shouldn't be involved in the process. You wish they were more. I'm really curious about that because it's interesting you say that. My father was a very influential figure in my life. We're approaching the second anniversary of his passing.
Mm.
And the ironic part is he basically told me the devil is your mortgage. And you should basically, a mortgage is a necessary evil to own your first home. And your goal should be to get rid of it as quickly as possible. And then I doubled down and am in a tremendous amount of debt, but whatever. That's not for nothing. But like, what do you think that that's an old school, new school thing? Do you think that it's just that parents are worried? What? Because that really interests me because when we talk about the hustle or keep hustling or what it means, a lot of times parents think that they're inspiring their kids and really they're, not to get too philosophical, but like removing that inspiration. And I feel like buying a home, it's a pretty big deal, especially a first home. Younger people, I assume you work mostly with, that age bracket of people. You want as many people in your corner that are giving you the right advice. That's part one of the question. Second part is, do you think that a lot of people jump into it and take mortgages on or take debt on without knowing what they're doing, and that could get them into trouble?
And I think yes, Sean, and not to say dads are good, bad, or indifferent. I won't judge anyone's father or what they're saying to you because I know better. But I do think they grew up in a different day and age, right? You could have a stay-at-home mother with 4 kids under a roof, and dad could go out and pay for the house, the car, all of it all together. And you could be mortgage free in 15 to 20 years without much issue. And this is as easy as, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, we were seeing one, salary qualifying you for a decent size starter home. That's no longer the case. Unfortunately, starter homes have gotten a little out of control. And it's just we're in a different environment, right? We do things a lot differently than we did when they were, our age. And I think this is every generation, right? I mean, it's the old adage of I walked a hill, with one pair of shoes between me and my brothers, uphill both ways.
In the snow, in the summer.
We always had it tougher, and I do the same to my kids. But my kids are going to be more advanced than I am, and that's the whole point, right? If we're not pushing, our kids one step above where we were in life, what are we doing here? We're not trying to keep a status quo, but in the same respect, there's a culture. So there's a cultural aspect and a tradition aspect that some people have. So it's a weird balance to respect because I don't know everyone's culture or their family upbringing, or your dad might have said, hey, mortgage is the devil, and then there might be another person who said, hey, this is the leverage that you'll need to start five more businesses and make more money for yourself and gain true financial freedom. So it's a point about having that respect, but being that person who's been in mortgages for 15 years and doing that budgeting with them. Most people qualify for a mortgage and they sit there and they say, okay, I can use 45 to 50% of my income for it. That's not true. Like, do you want to eat? Do you know what an electric bill costs? Do you know what the maintenance are? Do you know how much it costs to have someone mow your lawn, or are you going to do it for yourself? These are all things that people don't consider when they're sitting there for their first home and have come, especially where we are, an apartment from Queens, Manhattan, wherever they lived before. And now they own this piece of land, or even if they're buying an apartment, there's maintenance, there's bills, there's things to keep up with. And just, I sit there and I have this perspective that I think a lot of dads don't have, that, I have the patience of dealing with, all of my children and kind of walking them through this process, trying to explain to them what I do for a living. I mean, that's always the fun thing, right? Your kids at a certain age and you have to explain to them what you do for a living. So I've broken it down to that level of a 5-year-old.
You are not, and you don't play for the New York Giants or the Jets.
Exactly.
All right.
You know,
So that you could very easily explain. Look, there I am. I
yeah.
play football,
I'm
but
not a doctor
uh,
or a lawyer. I don't have those easy to explain jobs.
exactly.
I
Try
guess
insurance broker. Try
you-
insurance
I
broker.
can
Same
only
thing.
imagine. My dad helps people get houses. Well, what does he do? He's a real estate agent. No, he's not. He does
No,
something
right.
else. He works with
Right.
the money. I'm,
He helps them get the money. Oh, he works in a bank? Not quite.
not,
I
not
don't get
quite.
it.
Not anymore. So it's a unique perspective that I've just had over these last years.
Do you think that that dream of the average American owning a home has changed or should change or shouldn't be there or is not for everyone?
It has changed, and I don't think it is for everyone. I mean, there is a certain part to it where people see it as an investment. I don't think it's the dream. There used to be the dream you could buy the homestead and you pass it down generation to generation, right? Our parents probably bought, maybe not our parents, maybe their parents bought a home saying, my kids are going to live here and then they're going to give it to their kids. We no longer think that. Now it's, hey, I can buy this, I can live in it for a certain amount of time, pay it down and appreciate it, and then flip it for the next thing that's a little bit better, or maybe to buy my own apartment and get my kids the down payment on their first house. The thought of living in one place for generations is gone. And I don't know if that happened last generation or two ago, but there's a different kind of philosophy. And renting isn't necessarily a negative move for some people. And that's the hardest part of this job, is sometimes you have to just look people in the eye and say, hey, you need to rent for 4 to 5 more years and save if you really want to do this, because it's an investment. And if you're not investing in the other places and all the right places, you're setting yourself up for a hard and long end of life cycle. And I always have to think beyond the next 10 years and into the 30, 40 year, where this is going to put me and my clients. So it's a different kind of approach than we ever have had to take.
I assume you can tell the difference between those who have the privilege of having some sort of financial education versus those that don't. Meaning, I'm sure that there are people that come to you that say, this is my plan. They understand a little bit like what leverage is, what it means, where the market is now, what happens if interest rates go up, what happens if interest rates go down, all that kind of stuff. And then you probably have people that say, listen, my goal my whole life, I'm the first person in my family who went to college or not. I'm the first person to have a job, and I'm the first person who can maybe afford a home. And you probably have to educate them on like what the process is. It's not just you. I remember when I bought my house, my uncle was my attorney, and he said to me, I was reading. I remember the mortgage thing was like I had to sign 5,000 times, and my wife was in the middle of taking finals in graduate school, so I had power of attorney for her, so I had to sign 10,000 times.
Sounds like fun.
I remember he looked at me, and I'm the guy. My father was sitting there, my mother was sitting there, and I'm the guy who reads every document. And he's like, "Listen, you can read this all you want, but I just want to know how this works. Here's what you have to pay every month. If you pay it, you get to live in your house and be happy. If you don't, the bank comes and takes it." That's basically the simple conversation here over the next X amount of years. But I think it's more complex for people, and it's interesting because I think that a lot of people probably could benefit from hearing your perspective as the first that they have on finances. Meaning, not having the preconceived notions about what it should be, what they heard from their, like we're talking about hearing from parents and grandparents and that multi-generational thing. And maybe if what you're saying is true, which I agree with, that that things, the times are changing, then that might be the wrong pretense
Yeah.
in how you should look at it. So what do you think is like the number one thing that people look at wrong, or the number one change in perspective that people should have that you've seen over the last, I don't want to say 10 years because obviously the rates have drastically changed, but let's say since the rates have increased from those glory days of 3.5% for 30-year, mortgages, like what do you think is the number one perspective error that people make when they come to meet with you the first time?
So the perspective error from right now, I mean, and this changes, year to year. But right now it's insurance. It's something people are coming in now with. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we should be happy about that, but we're using the
I
same
am.
expectations we had 4 months ago.
I don't. What's I just want to be. I'm going to interrupt you. The reason why I raised my hands for those who are watching or those who are listening, just know what you did, is the only person I say this because I don't hide from it. It's not that I'm happy about it, but the only person the person who benefits the most from raising insurance costs is me. I'm the only person that benefits. Meaning, the company has figured out that they're not making as much money as they need to, and there's actuaries that figured that out. The consumer is paying more, but the broker gets the same commission.
Yeah.
So I was half joking.
Yeah, but that's been one of the biggest struggles. I mean, because it's gone from 150, 160% in the last renewal cycle, it's been a real shock for some people. And I think it is. And when you're playing in the smaller end, the starter homes, not really in Westchester, but maybe all the way in southern Western or northern Westchester, four, 500,000, $600,000 homes, you're in one thing. But when you're looking at, that second home, that 1.5 to 2 million, which, a lot of my clients have done their first home 10 years ago. Now I'm doing their upgrade. That bill gets quite significant quite fast. What used to be 4 grand is now 7 grand, which $3,000 isn't just a drop in the bucket. So it's a different budgeting perspective that I don't think people are taking right now.
And I think I agree with you 100%. And one of the things that I think people need to think about, and this is not a podcast about finance, but I love that we're getting into personal finances because everyone should be thinking about it. And that is that working with someone like you and working with someone like me, and this is why I'm glad that we're having this conversation, not just Aaron and Aaron, is free.
Yeah.
Meaning, speaking to an insurance agent, I did a series on people that think that they're moving to Florida to escape income taxes. And if you think that insurance rates in where you deal have gone nuts, Florida is insane.
Well, buildings
And
are falling from the sky there. So, I
right, but
mean,
no, but it's also like, don't, I have people that tell me, oh yeah, my parents told me they live in Connecticut or New Jersey or Westchester or even Long Island, and they're paying $8,000 a year for a similar house to mine, and I have to break the news to them like, hey, you need to think about this when you make that offer because your insurance is going to be $28,000 a year,
yeah,
and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy the house, but I think that people really need to lean on advisors in that. I'll tell you another thing, and people might come at me and hate this. It's like, whatever. I don't think the rates are going down. Mortgage rates might go down, and I hope they do from my own selfish perspective. But insurance rates, they will not go back to where they were 3 years ago or
no,
2 years ago.
no,
They might go down a little bit. You might have a carrier that says, or a company that says, I like this locale. Okay, you're going to save 10%.
yeah,
Or you're a new home buyer. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. But like really going back to that, and so people don't think about it. It's just like not thinking about the water bill. It's not thinking about the power bill.
yeah,
When I got my first water bill, I was like, "You pay for water in New York City?"
yeah.
Like, I thought there was only gas. I thought it was Con Ed. What is this DEP thing?
Yeah, and Con Ed's constantly putting in 10 to 12% increases each year, and now putting in for emergency increases. I mean, that bill alone has gone from the 4 to 5s for an average home to the 8s to 9s. I mean, that's another $300 to $400 during your winter months. That's a lot of money.
So what should people do? Should they wait longer to buy a house? I mean, I'm thinking about the average hustler. Like my goal is, I'm coming out of college, going to work super hard, party hard on the weekends because that's what everybody thinks they're going to do. Eventually, I'll settle down. I want to have a family, white picket fence, home. Yet you're saying when you look at the expenses with someone, which again, you don't get paid unless the deal closes.
Yeah,
I don't get paid unless the deal closes. So we have to look at the whole picture and say, at the beginning, right, you're the first person in the door, maybe the realtor, but after the realtor's like, is this deal going to happen? Is this deal going to work?
yeah.
What should people's perspective be, or what should they be looking at? Let's say the 23-year-old. Forget about the person that's now giving you the application. The new graduate from college, or they probably don't go to college anymore. Like, what should they be thinking about as their process?
So for me, if I was to go, and when I talk to 21 through 25-year-olds, I always say buy your first apartment as fast as you can. Do an FHA or a 3% down program. Find a crappy one bedroom condo for 200 grand out in Queens. I grew up in Queens, no hate, all
This
love.
guy's ripping on Queens. Unbelievable.
Go
How
Mets.
dare
I'm
you?
from Kew Gardens, so don't worry about it.
Really? I live in Kew
Yeah.
Gardens Hills.
There you go. I was from Kew Garden Hills, the co-ops on 77th and 138th. That's the corner I
Love
grew up in.
that. Yeah,
So
of course.
but yeah, go buy one of those. You can afford it. I hate to say it, but like, don't go out a few weekends. Don't buy pizza every other day, and you can save up the 3 to 8 grand that you need to close on a co-op because the leverage you're going to gain from that and the appreciation you're going to gain by paying yourself that rent and knocking down that mortgage over a time period. That's what you're going to use because then you're going to sell that apartment and you're going to use it as the down payment for the bigger house. And as your income increases, you're going to feel so happy that you might be in a crappy apartment in a crappy neighborhood where you got to walk to the trains for 20 minutes, but that sacrifice is going to set you up when you're 28 to 30 and you find the wife or the husband or whatever it might be or the partner that you want to spend time with and you want to buy the house or the bigger apartment in Manhattan. Now you've got the leverage to do so. And I don't think you can do that by just saving. I think inflation is eating away at dollars, and I think rent costs are too high for you to actually get there. I think it's about sacrificing, not living. You can't live in Murray Hill. Not every 24-year-old can live in Murray Hill. And listen, if you can beg and borrow parents for a couple bucks here or there, great. And add a little bit more to it. But I think that's a more worthwhile use of money than anything a 22 to 25-year-old can do with it. And stop with the crypto. Do buy some. Buy a real asset.
I was going to say that's like the most old school thing you've ever said. Like you
Um,
sound like an 8-year old now.
I am a
But
dad.
that's it. You're a dad. I That's a great segue. And I would, by the way, I just want to say, I always tell people read the bio, but everyone should be following Aaron because even if you get one piece of advice and it impacts you or changes your perspective, like finances are not a joke. And I now I sound like the old man, but it's like I think that people who make the wrong move overextend their debt. Credit card companies underpay, not making those moves, that could really set someone back
Yeah.
decades. I happen to agree with you on buying as soon as you can, but even if a person can't, it's having the right perspective. So because I feel like the wrong move is far more detrimental than not making the right move. Meaning not buying that apartment, like you're saying. I agree with you that should be the move. But let's say someone doesn't. At least you shouldn't make the negative move or the negative play, which sets you back. And the only way to learn what not to do or what to do is to follow the experts. And Aaron's one of them. So I think everyone should follow them.
So I tell the one story just because you made the point. 4 years ago, I started with a woman who had a 735 credit score, above average. She made one late payment on a car lease. It dropped to 640, which totally changes your financial life. It took her 3 years from then. We just got back up into the mid sevens. So it was 1 month late, one bad mistake put her down for 3 years. Now, was she knocked out of anything? No, but now everything costs more. Now it's harder to dig yourself out of the hole. So you really are, you're right. It's the one wrong move can set you back a lot further than 100 right moves. So it's important to pay attention.
I love that. I want to pivot. You said your most important job is a dad.
Yeah.
First of all, we're going to have a very quick moment of silence for your garden. Okay, we're done with that. Aaron, the other Aaron, the Westchester Aaron, has identical twin boys,
Yeah.
which is awesome. Those who know me, and he's going to be on the podcast eventually, I know that I'm an identical twin. Immediately when you said that, I'm going to be public about this. I said I'm sorry because the amount of abuse that my brother and I dished is not something that any parent should experience. I'm a father of 5. I shouldn't really. It's whatever. What's interesting about, and I want to dig in on this as it relates to the hustle, is you said you had 2 daughters
Hmm.
and then you had 2 sons. And I don't want to get to, male chauvinism or things like that. I don't believe in that. But I have 4 daughters and a son. And so it's my situation is a little bit different in that my son and I, like, we're the guys team and we just escape and do things because, like, it's about survival at a certain point. For you, I feel like hanging out with the girls is survival and avoiding the delinquent guys who you're just hoping are not flushing each other's, head down the toilet or jumping off the roof. But when you look at that and you want to be the dad who gives the right advice and inspires your children, what is it like when you have your girls or your older girls, the girl dad pride, which I have obviously a tremendous amount of. And then there's these, I don't want to be respectful, but I would, let me say this. I'm going to call them rascals.
Yeah.
I've never met them, but my brother and I would have taken that with pride.
That's
So I hope that if they ever hear this, they realize that I'm speaking from that if they're not rascals, they're doing something wrong as identical twin
that's a
boys.
kind word for them, we'll say.
Yes, yes.
You know, listen, and there's an age gap too for me. So my daughters are 13 and 11 right now, and you know, my boys are 6, and they're twins. So there's,
Yowza.
you know, that age gap. I'm also 7 years older than I was when I had my first one, so my body isn't quite up to par with where it used to be to handle it.
Hulk Hogan
Um,
is not handling the home wrestling as well as he should at this
you
point.
know, the back doesn't last as long as many rounds as it used to, especially when there's someone sneaking up giving you a kidney punch, in the middle of it. But it is different, and and even I see the difference between my girls. One's a theater girl and one's a cheer girl. So they have different needs as well, and my boys are starting to differentiate, and it's the most fascinating thing with identical twins. It's like their interests are completely diverging now at 6 years old, and while they're still playing and wrestling and always in to cause trouble with each other. One wants to be a fireman and one wants to be an astronaut. And I thought they would be identical their whole lives, but they're really starting to have to be dealt with in different ways. And things need to be explained in different ways. One will get a concept and the other won't. Because you're explaining it, maybe you're explaining it too based on money and not on toys, and the other one needs that kind of clarification. So it's, taking those 4 different perspectives in the house, as well as my wife, who's a psychologist and works in, AI tech, and having to explain what I'm doing to 5 different people, which that kind of what spurred the whole, reapproach to my social media and how I explain to my clients. I try to figure out a way and pick out the attitude that I'm dealing with. I have 5 in my house, so I have enough range that I've practiced on different ones where I can tell if you're falling asleep when I'm talking to you, or you're interested in what I'm saying, and maybe one is and one's not. So it's a balance, right? I mean, like much like anything in life, it's a balance. But we hustle and we do all this work so that we can spend time with them. And I've more and more realized I need to prioritize that. And sometimes you have to sacrifice a little of the work stuff because that they're not going to be here forever. Unfortunately, the 13-year-old, I was signing my first car lease, and I was one of those guys who at the dealership was like, "Crap, I never got insurance. Let me call my agent," and he did it. So I'll give him a high five for that. But I realized the next time I'm there, I'm most likely going to be shopping for a car for my daughter as well in 3 years.
Please don't remind me. My oldest is a 13-year-old girl.
Yeah. So, I'm like, wow,
And I have no
it's this
sisters, by the way.
balance. Yeah.
I'll tell you the interesting thing is I have no sisters, and
Oh,
my wife has no brothers. So it was yes. I live as I said, where my son and I were severely outnumbered.
it
I
sounds
love it.
like it.
By the way, I love it. I love it's interesting. I listened to you, and you mentioned that you grew up with a single mother, and you were obviously you had some grandparent influence and other influences. But I think, and I've said this publicly on this podcast multiple times, that the influential figures in our lives, specifically parents and those who don't have them in America, and I don't want to get involved in any political side of it. There's just something that kids get by osmosis, being around their parents, the values and things like that. And I listen to you, and I hear you, and yeah, okay, the joke I say is, those 4-day July 4th weekends,
Hmm.
like when like July 4th is on a Tuesday. I remember vividly the first time that happened to me when I had 2 kids. I called my father, he should rest in peace. And I said, Dad, I just have one question. You're almost 50 when I was born. How on God's earth did you do this 4-day weekend? My wife and I are ready to murder each other, but not because we don't love each other. We're ready to murder both of our children. I'm ready to pull a car over on the side of the road, come back from the beach, and just walk at this point. And I'm exhausted. And we haven't even gotten to bath time, bedtime, or anything like that. And I'm 26. So I mean, I just but I listen to your pride, and I think that the people who focus on legacy and educating their kids, and we joke about the rascal thing and the wrestling, but it, it's just amazing. It's one more girl, bam, twin boys.
Yeah, that's what they're supposed to do. I mean, 6-year-old boys are supposed to act like that. I mean, you hate to be the
Yeah,
chauvinist, but kids are supposed to be kids, right? And there's a point where they need to grow up a little, but there's also a point where you got to be like, hey, be a kid. Go cause the trouble. Go play in the dirt. Who cares? We can always plant the garden again next year. It's not the end of the world. And
But
you've got to let some of it go at sometimes, but it's
just don't
work.
cut your sister's hair. Cutting your sister's hair is
Just
a huge no-no.
or each
Yeah.
other's bangs. That's another one my
Yeah.
wife will
Yeah.
not
Just,
stand for.
yeah.
You
There's no
know,
scissors and hair, but other than that, everything else is basically repairable.
exactly, and no gum because that's always a fun one.
Yeah. Oh,
But and we finally got one nice room in the house. My wife has one nice sitting room where she's like, no going in there and making a mess.
with
That's
two
it.
with two padlocks, fingerprints, and retina scanners like the
I
Fort
mean,
Knox.
it's probably what we do need, but it is what it is.
What has been the most shocking thing for you with the boys versus the girls?
It's the mess. I mean, my girls were like tidy, clean girls. I mean, these boys wake up, you dress them, and all of a sudden they're just covered in head to toe. I'm like, you weren't even eating anything that could make a mess. And there's milk all over the kitchen counter, and they're just looking at you like, I don't know.
That's because we were trying to spit it from one of our mouths to the other. Dad, what's wrong with
I
you?
mean, that's literally what they were doing in the bath last night. I'm like, what? Like, this is gross. But they have that filter's not there.
It's funny because I have an older brother, and he should also be on the podcast. And we grew up together. He is 2 years, just 2 years older than us, and he's the nicest, sweetest, calmest, most angelic kid. He's the reason why my father agreed to have one more kid. Sucker ended up with two delinquent twins. I like even today, like we look at each other and we're just like, he honestly got the short end of the stick. Like honestly, when you're the crazy twins, like it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're doing our thing. We're making the mess. And he's the guy who ends up just like, kind of suffering as the normal kid who doesn't do the things that we were supposed to. So I don't know. I wanted to get into the twin thing, but I also think it's amazing that you're giving this influence for those watching. I'm just having some slight headphone issues, but we're making it happen here on the Keep Hustling podcast. In that you're focused on that influence, and I think that a lot of times, my father grew up without a mother, and I think that the people who sometimes have it the hardest are able to give back the most. So I think that your kids are set up better than most. And I'm happy that at least and I think that we're benefiting from that because you wanted to give that influence and that advice. We're seeing that publicly, so I for one am grateful for that.
Yeah, listen, when you don't have a guide for that role, you tend to overcompensate, right? You throw your whole self into it and being in sales and someone in our industries, we don't do anything 80% even. It's 120%. I know that's cliche, and I'll get the math people yell at me, but it's all or nothing. You throw yourself at something because it's the only way you can succeed. So it's something that I find myself trying to not be as harsh with them because they're not clients, they're kids. But at the end of the day, you are who you are too. So
I love that. Thank you for being here again.
yeah,
We have a closing tradition on this podcast where we ask our guests to leave us with their favorite motivational or inspirational quote and what it means to them in their hustle. And with that, I'll say again, everyone should follow your advice or follow you to at least get the advice. Whether they follow your advice is a different thing. Reach out to Aaron, speak to him, set up a time. It's very easy to set up an appointment with him. At least just be educated. And I say
yeah,
that about the insurance industry too. Like just the thing that irritates me the most in my sales role is not when people don't go with us or don't buy with us or don't buy that product or end up the deal not going through. It's when people do something ignorantly and they come back later and said, I wish I would have known that you told me at post facto. So everyone should follow you. And with that, I'll say, Aaron Pisano, thank you for being here.
mhm.
And the floor is yours.
Thanks for having me. No, I mean, I just really appreciate you bringing me on here, and keep hustling. I guess that's the motto, right?
The motto is keep hustling. And
Love it.
you're the first person to use the keep hustling quote. So I appreciate it.
I
Hashtag keep
love it.
hustling. And
Hashtag.
everyone should.
Yeah.
So this has been another episode of Keep Hustling with my guest, Aaron Pisano. Thank you again for being here. Remember, do well by doing good. Keep hustling, as Aaron said. And of course, and always, just keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. The listeners are the most important part of this show. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more listeners. Plus, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. We have some amazing guests and topics lined up for you, and we don't want you to miss out. And finally, if you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod on Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you to continue the conversation. Thanks again for tuning in and supporting our podcast. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.